Welcome to episode 3. In the last video, we learned that among indigenous tribes, hearing voices is typically considered a gift and can often mark the beginning of one's transformation into becoming a shaman. This is in direct opposition to the Western attitude toward hearing voices, or auditory hallucinations, which paints them in overtly dark tones, and understandably so. Many of those who hear voices are tormented by them, and the very suggestion that these voices may be a positive thing could be seen as offensive. But what if this was largely cultural? What if the voices heard by Westerners were indeed more likely to be violent and threatening than those heard by non-Westerners? As crazy as it sounds, there is some excellent research to support this notion. Tanya Luhrmann is an anthropologist at Stanford, who in 2014 led a cross-cultural study on people who hear voices. The reason cross-cultural studies are so important is that over 95% of psychological research is done on people who are so-called weird. That is, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Researchers tend to assume that their findings on weird populations generalize to the rest of the world, but as we're about to see, that's just not the case. We'll talk more about the weird paradigm in a later video, but for now, check out the link I posted in the description. Okay, back to Tanya Luhrmann. She and her team interviewed 20 adults with schizophrenia in San Mateo, California, 20 in Accra, Ghana, and 20 in Chennai, India. They found broad similarities across the board. For example, many of the participants heard both positive and negative voices, and in all three cultural settings, some participants reported hearing the voice of God. What makes this research so interesting, however, were the differences that Luhrmann and her team found. One such difference was that Americans were significantly more likely to use the labels schizophrenia and schizoaffective when describing themselves. Interesting, but not exactly mind-blowing. But wait, there's more! Many participants in the Chennai and Accra samples insisted that their predominant, or even only experience of the voices was positive. Not one American did so. Wait a minute, what? Yes. Apparently, the voice-hearing experiences of people with serious psychotic disorders are shaped by local culture. In the United States, the voices are harsh and threatening. In Africa and India, they are more benign and playful. Think about that for a moment. We think of, or at least I used to think of, schizophrenia as a disease in which someone is constantly bombarded by torturous and threatening voices, never benign or playful ones. Reflecting on this, on why I viewed schizophrenia in this light, led me to wonder about the extent to which the media plays a role in reinforcing these stereotypes, but we'll return to that later on in the video. For now, we're sticking with Luhrmann. In a second paper published on the study, she sums up the differences between the three groups as follows, saying, in a California sample, people were more likely to describe their voices as intrusive, unreal thoughts. In the South Indian sample, they were more likely to describe them as providing useful guidance. And in our West African sample, they were more likely to describe them as morally good and causally powerful. Useful guidance? Morally good? What is going on here? What can account for this stark contrast? Spoiler alert, I have no idea. But Luhrmann seems to have a few, noting that Europeans and Americans tend to see themselves as individuals, motivated by a sense of identity, whereas outside the West, people imagine the mind and self interwoven with others and defined through relationships. In other words, the Americans viewed these voices as an invasion of their individual selves, while the subjects in India and Ghana were, quote, more comfortable interpreting their voices as relationships and not as the sign of a violated mind. Okay, that makes sense, but it's not a very satisfying answer. It seems too simple to boil it down to Westerners being individualistic and non-Westerners being collectivist. Fortunately, Luhrmann is a total pro, and in her second paper goes deeper with this idea, introducing what she calls the social kindling hypothesis. The implicit and explicit ways in which a local social world gives significance and meaning to sensation, such as hallucinations, will alter not only the way those sensations are interpreted, but the likelihood and the quality of the sensation itself. Returning to the role of the media in shaping our view of people with schizophrenia, there's an interesting study done on entertainment media, that is movies and shows, and how they portray people with schizophrenia. It found that a majority of characters displayed violent behavior towards themselves or others, and nearly 1/3 of violent characters engaged in homicidal behavior. This stereotype is also reinforced in the news media, which seems to only talk about mental illness as it pertains to random acts of violence. All of this got me thinking about how in Western culture, where our media fetishizes violent hallucinations and our medical establishment considers hearing voices to be a disease, All of these forces could come together to create a powerful feedback loop. That, if Luhrmann's social kindling hypothesis is correct, would actually increase the likelihood that a person hearing voices would hear ones that are harsh and threatening, as opposed to the helpful words of guidance seen in other cultures. For the record, this is not a claim that Luhrmann makes. Rather, it just seemed logical given the media's outsized role in shaping our culture. Also, I want to clarify that these differences in voice hearing cannot be solely blamed on the media, which is just one factor in this seemingly complicated equation. Other factors seem to play a role as well, including childhood trauma, which we'll discuss more in episode 5. Question? Yes, you in the back there. What does any of this have to do with spiritual awakening? Great question. And you're right, I haven't explicitly addressed that. And that's because there's a couple more pieces of the puzzle that we'll be discussing in the next few episodes that I'm hoping will come together to make everything clear. Until then, I'll echo what I said in the last episode, which is that hearing voices, in my view, signifies a connection to the psychic realm. It does not matter the ideology of these voices, be they drugs, sensory deprivation, spiritual practices, or what we label mental illness. All of these represent instances in which the brain is tuned to frequencies beyond what we call normal or default waking consciousness, which is primarily concerned with the physical world. Hearing voices is not indicative of a brain disease. It's just being tuned to a different channel. And as we learned today, outside of Western society, these channels tend to be predominantly positive, offering guidance and moral support. Or as one man in the Chennai sample put it, they talk as if elder people advising younger people. You kind of lost me with the whole channels thing, but I'm hoping you'll explain it in future videos? Absolutely. That's all we've got time for today. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you got something out of it. In the next episode, we'll be taking a look at some research currently going on at the Yale School of Medicine, focusing on people with schizophrenia who hear voices alongside self-described psychics. And I've got to say, it's pretty cool. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.